the board workshop of November 16th to order. And at a board workshop, it's my understanding that we don't do the Pledge of Allegiance at a board workshop, so we'll dispense with that and get right into the work. Paul?
Good afternoon, board. And for the community, Ms. Julie Norton is not able to join us today. She has a work conflict, so she will be updated, but she had full confidence in her partners to move our work forward. So like we have in the past, Diana and I will facilitate the conversation. And really today, I titled today's workshop is Putting the Pieces Together. I shared the document with you, and that's really what we're looking to do today, is to continue to collaborate, but to really review the thinking of the board in its past workshops, and really review the work that we've put together. The board asked for us to put a couple examples out there on different pieces, and review the words we selected. And they were all your words. We just looked for themes, consistencies, those pieces. So I don't want to misconstrue it by making it sound like Diana and I came up with our own little words and threw them in there. They were the board's ideas, thoughts, phrases, and that we were trying to organize them for the board. So we'll do all those pieces, but really it's trying to make sure that with the values in the middle, that we keep referencing those values and then looking at the vision and then those strategic priorities, because there really needs to be a synergy between all three of those components, that not one sits outside of the others, but they really use each other to build on what we're trying to do as a district. What I put in here in the doc that I shared, that I will share my screen here in a second, it just has the definitions of the characteristics of a vision statement, so we can kind of cross-check ourselves. There's characteristics of effective strategic priorities. You got a link in there to the Padlet link, and that's where Diana, Kim, and I, and when I say that, I mean Diana and Kim, grabbed all the information that the board was talking about, and it's there for you. And then in this next section where it just says vision, and now I'm going to share my screen with you. In this section, this is where Diana, Kim, and I really spent just time putting words, phrases, and a couple examples of a vision. You see the values here, and really want to give the board kudos. As I kept going back to these are outstanding values. The board just did such really good work, and I know it took a lot of time to do these. But wow, what grounding values that we have as an organization. And that's why we have to create that synergy with this foundational work here. And then here are the strategic priorities. Again, I love the three buckets of the strategic priorities that the board selected. It makes a lot of sense now in my head, this academic excellence. And good job pushing back on the superintendent last time, where I was like, hey, do we really need that? You guys just did a really fantastic job of pushing back on that and saying, no, this is a component, and it is different than the value that we had in here around excellence in learning. So I needed to go back and remind myself what we were saying around excellence in learning. And then there's partnership, and then thriving environment. So what we did, again, we went back and we looked at the words you were saying, the phrases you were talking about, and we put some pieces together. The work today, which will be challenging, is let me go back to this vision piece, is making sure we have the right terms. Are we going down the right road together? Is this where the board sees us being? Are there things that we need to add? Are there pieces that we need to tweak? Because this isn't one of the outcomes of this, non-purposes, forgot my word, one of the non-purposes for today is to finalize a vision, is to finalize strategic priorities. But where we want to is get it ready for the strategic planning committee to mess with it. So you really think about it as you're the guardrails as we're going down this road. There's a lot of room to go down this road, but we want to say this is where we want to stay within strategic planning committee. Again, this is really strong work by the board that will hand off on each one from the vision in the strategic priorities. The values are done, and we want that for the strategic planning committee as well to ground themselves in these values, and then everything else works from there. Diana, any piece that I missed as we're talking about kind of what we do today?
No, I think you covered it. This was really exciting to be able to take your words and thoughts and all the work that's been done to this point and really kind of have a manifestation of what it is you've been talking about and try to put that, into a couple of examples for you to look at. So that was really exciting for Paul and Kim and I to kind of put our heads together and think through that. So we're looking forward to the discussion that will happen today. I also wanted to add too that we are in the process right now of accepting names for that strategic planning team. And we have 10 applicants as of today. So I shouldn't say applicants, folks are just submitting their names, but so 10 today, and that period in which we'll be accepting names will run through the end of the month.
And just to piggy on that, I thought that was outstanding. In the middle of all this craziness of a pandemic and everything else, that 10 community members would say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I see the value here. So I'm super excited about that and really pleased with the board's participation and gently nudging a few community members forward because that's what it takes. And as we talked about last time, we want a super diverse group. Who want to give us feedback and input as this, because again, the idea here is, I'm just going to go to this other piece I got here. It's really all around this feedback loop where the board, we're at the school board, and where you guys, this team right now is really on that vision, strategic priorities, and the values. Once we have that in a place where we feel like we want to push back to the strategic planning committee, that's where they'll take their time. And then we will push that out for more feedback. And then ultimately it keeps coming back to the board. Remember that. The board ultimately says, yeah, that's where we want this district to be in the area of vision, the values, and the strategic priorities. But it's also taking into account the different voices and perspectives throughout our community, and they'll add a lot of richness to it. So your job now is to we're going to start first with the vision piece. And again, we're not married to any of these 5 bullets, but what they are there for is to kind of give us a starting point and to make sure, are we in the right place? Are we kind of in the target? Maybe not the bullseye. That's not what we're looking for, nor are we looking for the bullseye from the board at the end of the day. But are we in, I don't know, all those other outer rings on a dartboard, but are we within the parameters of the dartboard itself? Because that's what we really want to hand off to the team. And then taking out the pieces where if I were throwing the darts, I hit the wall all the time. So any dart that hit the wall, we want to take off, being the word or phrases. And that's really for you guys to pull those pieces out and to really focus, narrow the work we're doing. So we'll start with vision, and then we'll go back down to the strategic priorities and do the same thing. Get us on the dartboard, get us into the game. Diana, anything else before I hand it over to the board?
No, I think you covered that. And really just, yeah, as Paul said, making sure that are we in the right space? Did we somewhat accurately capture where you wanted to be with the conversation that happened leading up to this point? So I would toss it, back to you.
All right. And honestly, our feelings will not be hurt if you say, man, that was even close to what I was thinking. But this is honestly your time now to kind of talk about the words, the phrasing, and again, what do you want as a vision of WSD? So I'm done for a moment. I'm going to hand it over to the board to kind of talk about your initial thoughts.
My initial thought. So I just want to make sure that you're not asking the board to spend its time wordsmithing.
No, that literally was a word that thank you, Laura. I do not want wordsmithing. That's not where we're at. We are not at that point at all. We don't need to change this verb to this and making sure this adjective is here. It is, are we in the right place to where you feel comfortable if we handed this off to the strategic planning committee, we wouldn't be down some other road completely divergent from where this board wants us to be. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay. So when we're looking at the vision, we got this pretty recently today, and I'm not sure if everybody had time to read through it and digest it. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little bullet items. The fifth one hardly counts because it's only 5 words. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to hear those out loud. Maybe we could just rotate through and read it out loud to see how it resonates, because sometimes when you see it printed on paper and you hear it spoken out loud, it comes across differently. Is the board okay with starting out like that?
Laura,
I'll go.
Laura,
Yeah?
this is Martin. I'd like to take a step back.
Yep.
In setting a vision, the first rule is decide who is the object of the vision. And we have 2 competing universes in these vision drafts. One is the student, the visionary student, or the student of the vision, and the other is the organization or the district of the vision. Now, playing around, I think if you think of it as a student, and I just kind of looked at that, I would go into 3 key words. I'm not quite sure what 3 key words I would use if the district was the object of the vision, but they would be different. And so I think we have a confusion of who the vision is about.
Okay. I think that's a good table setting, basically. Yeah.
It'll help us to know who the object is.
For listening, to each of the opportunities, so that we can. Is there anybody else that wants to provide comments regarding a framework and how we should hear or read these various statements? That was good, Martin. Thank you. Okay.
I was going to say, I appreciate that, it's said in a number of ways. We versus Wenatchee School District versus Wenatchee Schools have this expectation that we want this for our students, right? So I guess that's kind of how I read it. I don't see it as competing, but our vision is that we as a district are hoping and wanting this for every student that we encounter, right? That we are teaching, that we are mentoring, that we are advocating for, that we are providing opportunities for, that we are stretching to become their future citizen. So I don't have a lot of problem with the current framework. I did want to, we can come back to this concern, but I did want to talk about one of the words that's in our consistent words. And, but I can come back to that later. So I just had a concern about one of our words and kind of when I think it implies, so.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Anyone else for setting the framework while we hear the words in these various options? Okay, I'll go ahead and read the first one, and then I see you guys in a certain order, but I'm sure you don't see all of us in the same order. So I'll just pass the baton to the next person when I'm done. So the first one says, we envision that every Wenatchee students will actively learn, advocate, and be challenged by high expectations. Through individualized learning, seems like a comma is missing there. Through individualized learning, students will become resilient, active learners with a servant heart and promise of a future. Michelle, you want to go?
Sure. The Wenatchee School District will provide each scholar with the promise of a future and an individualized learning experience with high expectations, real world interactions, and challenging opportunities that produces resilient learners with a servant's heart and advocate's mind.
Okay. Martin?
Wenatchee schools will provide the promise of a future through individualized experiences, challenging real-world educational opportunities, and high expectations to create active and resilient learners, servant leaders, and advocates.
Okay. Maria?
Through learning opportunities, high expectations, and individualized educational experiences, Wenatchee students will have the promise of a future where they develop a servant's heart, advocate's hands, and a real world mind.
Okay. And then the last one is super quick. It just says transforming learning and life outcomes. Okay. So I'm going to start this off by just saying I see lots and lots of commonalities, different ways of saying similar things. We see the word challenged and expectations and world and servant's heart and advocates, servant leaders, advocates, in same ideas, just said in different ways. Are there any contextual differences that stood out? Or any feedback anybody wants to give? You don't have to answer that question if that's not what is on your mind.
Well, I'll chime in. So what I wanted to bring up is the word individualized. I think it has kind of a very subjective connotation. For our students who are K through 12, we know that in the earlier years, K through 5, the curriculum is relatively the same. And yes, we do kind of guide groups of students with similar learning, if some students are a little further behind or some students are a little further ahead, we have to adjust. But I short of doing an individualized education plan or IEP, I don't think we see necessarily an individualized type of education. So as students get into middle school and high school, obviously they can tweak their schedules to get something that's more, that resonates more with the pathway they want to go down, those personalized pathways that each of our districts are, implementing for our graduating seniors. But I think as a district as a whole, I'm uncomfortable with the word individualize or personalize. I know we had the word personalize in our previous mission or vision statement, and although it sounds really great, I think it's kind of a fluffy word if we're not specifically doing that. So I really like the content of a lot of these vision statements, but I struggle with that word because I don't think we're doing that on a K through 12 level, unless we were doing an IEP for every student, which thank goodness we're not. So that's a lot of work. But I would suggest that we think really we want to have that in, because again, to me, it means something very specific, and I would rather have substantive words that mean something rather than pretty words that make it sound nice, but we aren't really backing up with our actions. So I would recommend that we not have words like individualized or personalized. And if we're trying to capture a certain type of learning or education, that we use a different word that captures that better. But I would suggest that we not use those types of words. That's my feedback. Thank you.
Okay. So anybody, I have a reaction to that, but do other board members have a reaction that they would like to?
I can add to that, Laura, but I
Mhm.
did to Maria ahead of me because I've talked already. And you. If not, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think when I said looking at it with the object of the student, one of the three pillars would be related to individualized without choosing the word. And when I was scratching my head, I kind of agree with Michelle. And this is not intended to be words, this is intended to be core concept. To each the skills for their own goal, to be able to achieve their own goals. And that's what I see as the meaning of individual. In other words, each student will get out of the K-12 experience what that student needs to achieve their personal ambitions and goals. And I think actually we use some much simpler words if we say to each the skills for their own goals. That's just a way of saying the same thing, perhaps with a little different emphasis.
Martin, I really appreciate that perspective, because when I read individualized, I don't see that, but I like your explanation, and I would love to capture what you said, whether we use those exact words or something like it, that we're looking at the individual's chosen path or chosen goals to reach their, expectations for their education. So I really like how you highlighted that.
So one of the things that we heard quite a bit, and why this piece we grabbed it down here, but it can definitely move. We heard this a lot from you in very different ways.
Yeah.
And this is how we kind of framed it, is we get education right for each student, which I feel like is kind of right where Michelle and Martin were talking about, because it is a little bit more specific. And I do like the push. That's the kind of pushback we need, because every word in a vision statement we should be held accountable to, is that's where we're going to. That's what we want to do. It's a future focus. So good start.
Okay,
But we
well,
definitely heard
hold
that.
on. We got a couple more board members that might want to
Yeah.
chime in. Maria, do you?
I'm good.
Okay. So when I heard the word or see the word individualized, or what it means to me, has more to do with serving the needs, filling the gaps, or stretching students who are already, achieving. And I hesitate to use phrases like achieve goals or chosen path at the K through 12 level particularly, maybe even K through 8, because I sort of feel like students in the lower end of our in the lower classes don't think of the world in that way. They might say, I want to be a fireman or a policeman or a doctor or something like that, but they don't necessarily say, I want to achieve a reading goal of X, unless they're sort of guided through that to understand why they might want to set that as a goal. So if we're going to talk about achieving goals and chosen paths, I think that could apply to high school students, but I don't see it applying through K through 12. And what individualized means to me is that if we have a student who is 2 grade levels or 3 grade levels behind in reading or math or whatever, that the teacher is going to address that individual student's needs with a plan that's going to push them as far ahead. And we're already, as they can go, and we're already seeing that. We're seeing that at Orchard, where teachers are collaborating and charting students' progress and engaging students in the process of setting their own goals and pathway. But I just want to interject that the idea of goals and pathways, chosen pathways, might not apply to those K through 12 kiddos. I mean, 5 kiddos, five, not 12.
Thoughts on that piece?
I have some thoughts about how we divide the playing field, where I think we're in, to a certain extent, in semantics. And I'll begin with something that really isn't on the agenda. I'm choking on academic, because academic to me is restricted to classical core subjects. And I think that we are a district and we are a community where people have to learn. I like learning better. They have to learn what will work for them. And I take Laura's point. A young child in elementary or middle school can still have goals, expectations, aspirations, and it is our responsibility as the district to do everything for them, whether it's catch them up or allow them to extend or open up doors for them and all of those things. So I don't see that interfering with the to reach the skills that they ultimately need. But I think you need to complement that. We're also in the game of providing citizenship, and then if I flip over to who the object is the other way around, we've got I would call it a fiduciary or an asset caregiver responsibility to the community. We're taking care of the children assets, and we therefore need to be accountable in how we do that. So it begins to roll around as to how many arrows you put in your quiver, and each arrow can complement the other one, I think, and no single arrow is going to describe everything.
I would agree, and I think that's a good place for the strategic priorities, is to put the other arrows within that to be able to accomplish the vision. And I think that's that synergy that you're talking about, Martin, is where do all those pieces line up, and are they helping us move that vision forward ultimately? Because you're right, if we're a financial wreck, we're not going to be able to move student learning very far, because at the end of the day, it still takes dollars and cents to hire staff and to do great work and to hire and to do PD and all those other aspects. So still a piece around this individualized. Is that a word that we move forward to the next group of people? Or do we define it a little bit more? Because I agree with Martin, there's a little bit of semantics here of how do we want to define it. But again, in the world of visioning, every word matters, because it should be very concise. So the words we do choose will matter greatly.
I think I would have less of an issue with it if we're defining it as not an individualized experience starting from kindergarten, but as the student moves through, a more individualized path for the student, for meeting the student's goals or the student's post-graduation expectation or something like that. But I think it does become more individualized as a student moves through the district as they age. But I think it's, again, I think it can be a word with a generalized meaning that that is not entirely applicable for every student in the K through 5, particularly. So I would like to see, if we're going to use that word, that we're using it as students are moving through the district, as they have more choices for selecting courses or, and we don't usually have a lot of students K through 2 on IEPs. I mean, unless they come in with it through preschool. So anyway, I would like to see, if we're going to use that word, that it's very specific to the student's process as they're growing through their education in the upper grades. But I don't know if that's too much to put into a vision statement to make that narrow definition. But I really like that we have a number of pieces, even in that first statement. We're talking about active learners, advocates, and being challenged by high expectations. I love all those. I really like the resiliency. I also liked that Martin made reference to future citizens. And I know that came up a lot as well. So I wonder if there's a way that we could have those words, citizens or future citizens, as part of our vision, because I think that was a pretty highly used word at our previous workshops.
For me, listening to the conversation in regards to individualize, I feel like we do some of it at the K-5 level, whether that be intervention. It looks different at every building, but we do kind of tend to look at the student as a whole and say, okay, what kind of individualized services can we provide to get them to, get the student at grade level, or support them in their needed areas, but also in the high cap area. Those are my 2 cents on that.
I would like to see in our, if we don't say individualized because it doesn't apply all the way across the board, somewhere, where does it say in our vision statement that we talk about self-advocacy, advocate for others, which is, I'm not really sure what that means, but unless it's, because we also mentioned servant heart later, which I do understand, but where in our vision does it say that our students are individually supported to achieve at their highest level, or something like that? I mean, if you were not going to use individualized, or if that's an issue, or personalized, I think we're missing a big obligation that we have if we don't say we're gonna take care of you kiddos. You're gonna come not ready, and we're gonna do our best dang job to get you what you need to move you through and be successful.
I like that we have our role of educational advocates this year, that we started at the beginning of school. I wonder if there's a way that we could put individualized educational advocates, through the use of individualized educational advocates, because I think then that does speak to every student in the district. Am I right on that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we've got them all listed out to where kids are, it's not one-to-one by any stretch.
Right.
But your overall concept is right.
Yeah, I think that, because that is something that we are doing, and that every student has an educational advocate, and that it's a pretty low teacher-student ratio. It's adult student ratio. They're not necessarily teachers always, but I feel like that's a really important piece. And I don't know if saying that in a vision is, it's very specific as opposed to a general vision, but I think that's an important piece. If we're going to talk about individualized, we do have those educational advocates. If we're going to be continuing that, I think that is a highlight. If I was someone who was looking at our district and we said, you're going to have an individualized educational advocate, I think people might go, oh, what's that? And that makes you sit up and take notice, because it means that you're not just rolling into a school to say, oh, okay, yeah, my student tested behind in this, or they tested above and they can go to high cap. but it means that someone's really attentive to their educational needs, is getting to know them. And, it's not just, your teacher in the classroom with 20 to 30 kids, but it's a much lower ratio. So,
Yeah. Like the Highline School District on the west side, what theirs is to know every student by name, strength, and need, without saying exactly what you said, Michelle. That's I know Martin as Martin, and I know Martin for his strengths, and I know Martin for his needs, and then that's where that other piece of around the educational advocates and others to get to really know people and to know our kids. So that's a big piece in the Highline District. Just as I think about, as we've looked at many different visions locally and nationally, that's one that does stand out. And it's one that, quite honestly, that district knows. She superintendent over there, she advocates on that all the time.
I like that because it's not putting it on the shoulders of a particular person or position. It's putting it on the shoulders of the whole district or the whole school, that we know you, student, we know you, we know what you need, we know how to help you, and we will.
Yep. Yeah, it's powerful. Been great one just to copy and paste it. Hey, that's ours. We're done.
That was easy. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Well, I agree. I think that is really powerful. And, there's not that we necessarily want to copy and paste, but I think that's what we want something that resonates like that, to say, you are important, we know you, and we want to make a difference in your life in so many positive ways. So, I really like that you brought up Highline's vision there.
It had a sense of this piece when Diane and I and Kim were kind of working through different language, this idea around we get education right for each student. This sense, again, it can be expanded on, reduced, but there is something to be said for a vision that people know exactly what it is, and they don't have to go thumbing through somewhere to figure out what is the vision of this district. And again, Highline's a great example of a district that every staff member in that district, they know what they're about. They know they need to know their students. They need to know their strength and a possible need that kid has. And the other piece that I think resonates with me is it doesn't matter where you're at on the academic or social emotional trajectory. It's kind of that big umbrella of what we're trying to do for kids. And it doesn't matter where you're at. We know you. I know Maria. I know who she is and her pieces. And again, just tying back to what you talked about, Michelle, that educational advocate, that's a great action. That's a kind of a actionable step that says, no, look, this is how we're achieving that vision if that were ours.
Mm-hmm. The phrase "we get education right for each student" makes me cringe a bit.
And again, just we're not beholden to any words and anything. So rip it apart, make it better, make it a million times better.
I was going to say that we're a little bit getting into trouble by trying to be too precise with one word. I think Maria made the comment of high cap and everybody else. Laura wants to make sure with her goal, I think it's in the same zone. And so we have a spectrum of needs to goals, and children at different ages have various understanding of that. And if you use one word versus the other, you look like you're more on equity or more on excellence, but in reality, it is the whole bundle. So if we're going to keep moving and give it to the strategic planning team, then I'm more picking up on Laura's words that our vision is that we deliver the skills needed for, I lost my words, for the aspirations and skills of each student. But basically, I don't like support. And it is more than academic, but our job is to deliver to the student what the student, what fits the student's needs and goals And that's too long for a word, but it's the same zone. And then if we, the other way of doing it was kind of define individualized in parentheses afterwards. That would also be another way of moving on.
It made me think of Deming and the Japanese just-in-time education. We provide what's needed at the time it's needed, and as the kids are rolling down the belt.
We have a job to do.
I think that's a good. I mean, it's a weird analogy, but I sort of like it actually.
So I'm going to chime in here with the educational advocates. I'm looking at the third one. Wenatchee schools will provide the promise of a future through individualized advocate experiences or individualized advocates. I think that is a great place to use that individualized word, because I'm going to continue to push back because I want it to be meaningful for every student in the district, not just as the student goes through. So I would ask that if we use individualized, that we're pairing it with maybe the word advocates, since we have that. And anyway, I'm going to continue to beat that drum because I think that we have to back up what we're doing. If we're going to make those kind of general statements in our vision, we have to back it up by saying it's individualized and this is why. So because it's a pretty word, but
I think advocacy covers it though. Advocacy, I mean, I can advocate for you kiddos. Yay, I'm here at the board, I'm pushing, for what's best for you. And so I'm advocating, but I don't have direct contact with that student. I'm not really making a difference today.
right.
Second
But that's why I'm
grade,
saying
money.
every student has an individualized educational advocate. And I think that individualized advocacy, because we as a board are advocating for our whole student body at Wenatchee School District.
Right.
And if people reach out to us individually, we can email the superintendent, but overall our job is that we're advocating for all students, but that educational advocate has a very specific role for 10 students, right? So I think that's huge. I mean, not every district does that. The fact that we were able to come up with that during a pandemic and that people felt more connected, and that hopefully that connection is keeping students online longer, right? That it's helping them engage, whereas in the spring we had a lot of difficulties with that. So I think it was a great move on our staff's part to try that out, and I think it's going to pay off. For times when we have to be doing online learning, because that bond is already there. So anyway.
I guess I need more clarity on what this educational advocate is. Because I haven't seen it at our level. So I'm a little lost. Is it it's beyond the classroom teacher? I know we have family advocates that were retitled to educational advocates. Is their funding source different than it has been in the past? Because I know their caseload were specific to a specific population. So that's why I'm a little confused on this.
So mainly, you're right, Maria, at the family advocates, more at the elementary level. So kind of a broader reach there. At the middle and high school, literally there are 15, 20 kids have an educational advocate assigned to them to be checking in. How are they doing? Where are they at on their whole pathway forward? Just that opportunity to check in with kids. So you're probably not seeing it as much at Washington because there are fewer family advocates to be able to go around to all the kids. And at the elementary level, we still have one teacher for the vast majority of the students, where the secondary, I have 4 core teachers and somebody to tie all that work together.
Okay, so I guess my concern with that would be it's kind of like the same thing as individualized learning. It doesn't seem to be across the board, K through 12.
Or even K through 5 even seems like.
Yeah, I guess my impression was that was happening at the elementary level, and I apologize if that, because I don't have an elementary kiddo anymore. So, so I guess you're right. If it's not happening at K through 5, then it's not individualized.
I mean, we're definitely getting that through our classroom teacher because she's amazing,
Right.
as well as the rest of the teachers. But can that be really said for every kiddo in our district?
And then also I'm thinking about what we say at this point of time. If this strategic vision is going to last us for some period of time, obviously we want to do updates and so on. I think we need to be careful about being too specific about how we're implementing the vision, because that could change over time, the next budget year or whatever, enrollment goes up or down, or different resources become available or not available.
Yeah, that's a good point, Laura. Yeah, it's that vision piece is really what do we want where do we want our district to be in the future? What is that vision for us in the future? Where do we want our students to be, our organization, to Martin's point? Where do we want to be? That ideal educational aspect, or vision for what we want. And again, our job today is not to define it completely, but to make sure, are we getting in the right space? Because we heard also this whole future citizen concept. And what we can do with the individualized piece is keep it here for now, but also have that push it to the other groups to get their feedback and perspective on it as to what does that mean. I do think we have a real world example of when we say things and then we don't follow up with them, from Diana's experience with the last strategic plan. Maybe Diana unmute to really talk about that. I forgot the term. It might have been personalized or individualized, quite honestly. So would you talk about that, and then some of the feedback you received from some community members, not all by any stretch of the imagination?
Yeah, and I think the board hit the nail on the head. The term personalized really did become somewhat problematic. Everybody's interpretation of that was slightly different. A lot of feedback that I received just over the course of working directly with our last strategic plan was an expectation that we had more of that IEP for every student, and we were perhaps over-promising and under-delivering. And so I think that was really healthy, good conversation for the board to have about the word individualized, because it is very similar, and especially when it's inextricably linked to a term like IEP that has to do with our special education population and the supports that they receive. So I think that was an area that was challenging for us in carrying out our last strategic plan, because everybody's idea around what personalized meant was very different.
Yeah, I can see that. And also what I want us not to do is, we also hear a lot from people who feel as if their students have fallen through the cracks. Like we have not addressed their individual shortfall or learning need or whatever. And I hear not only from parents, but staff over time is like, why are we advancing these kids to the next grade level? They're not really, or we implement, a new curriculum, and the implementation period is a 4 or 5 year period. And sometimes I sort of feel like we're, doing some kids a disservice while we're transitioning from one thing to another. And the attachment that I have with individualized is that so maybe there's a better way to say it, but no matter what we do in the district, how we're moving forward, what we're changing, what we're whatever, that we don't forget Johnny, second grade Johnny. He needs extra support for learning. And how do we say that we're going to be mindful of every student and make sure that we're providing that student with the resources and feedback that he or she needs to succeed? That's the piece. It's about the cracks. It's about kids that fall through the gaps or get pushed along without really knowing what they need to know.
I want to write down mindful of every student.
I think this year, the way, the startup, the parent-teacher conferences at the startup, and even the ones we just had in October, allowed for teachers to really ask those questions. What can we help you with? And it wasn't just the academic piece of it. It was, the technology, the home environment. How can the school district support you as working parents? So I think the way we've done things because of this COVID thing, and I think, Paul's mentioned that the district has received positive feedback. I think it just really personalized it for each family and student. I mean, I don't know. I'm not stuck on the word individualized, but it definitely personalized it.
Yeah.
Again, not married to the phraseology of it, but it is what I hear is we do get it right. We get it right for each kid, and maybe even pulling out that education piece, because Martin's hammered on this consistently. It's more than just education. It's what Maria just talked about, all the different components. And I think we've all learned that through this pandemic, how important schools are for our entire community, from the mental health to the academics to the social emotional piece of connecting with humans. Really important aspects of really what this board wants as their ultimate vision. What do we want for our kids? And Laura, you described that piece around, we don't want any child to fall through the cracks. So that's that component of kids, but it's not all kids. So how do you weave it to make sure that it's not just filling in gaps, but also moving kids forward from where, some of our kids are Yale and Harvard and non-university bound, and they're going to transform the world next week, thankfully.
So really, we're wanting to project that the Wenatchee School District, it has a mindfulness of each student's abilities and goals and limitations, and is able to advocate and teach and provide opportunities to help move them towards their goals. And I think that mindfulness is, if we're talking about each student, I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about, Laura, is that we're mindful so that these students are not falling through the cracks, right? So that if they're 2 years behind in reading, that we've got them in the right interventions so that, maybe they have dyslexia testing and they get all the assistance they need so they can make progress. And they may not be in standard for a couple of years, but they're going to make progress and they're going to be able to be proficient, hopefully by graduation, right?
Identifying a need is really important, what you just said, because the dyslexia was a good example, because how many times have I heard, maybe you haven't, but I have heard about people who were dyslexic and wasn't discovered until after they graduated, or they were in college. It was if we're mindful, and dyslexia isn't something that starts when you're 18, it starts when you're born. And if we're mindful, we should be providing resources for that. But also, I focused on kids that were falling through the gaps, you know, at the lower end of the academic spectrum, but it applies to kids who are at standard or above as well. What are we doing to challenge them and move them forward? If we're mindful, we're doing something for every student.
I don't think this does much except add to what you've said already, but I'll begin with a story. I got really mad at work about 20 years ago, and as the biggest font and the boldest font I could find, I just printed out, "I care," and stuck it up in my office. Talk about mindful, and we are caring about everybody. And I think that's a combination of ethics, because as a school district, we should have the ethics to care about everybody, and that links to social justice. And then we have the fiduciary investment, DECA kind of responsibility, Laura, that we have an ethics, and we also have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of the assets of our community. But I don't think that's going to advance anything you've said, except to help drive the conversation.
Yeah, equitable is a good word. Equitable education.
And just remember, you got your values down here, and that's where we will find that nice synergy that you have. Because I was doing something similar when I was just messing with it by myself, and I was like, oh, I had to keep going back down to our values, because I kept wanting to put in the equity and the inclusion. And this board and the previous board just did some beautiful work on these three terms, and why it's got to be this balance between the two.
Yeah, well, it's good that thank you for pointing that out on the values, because I think that sort of covers what my thought was.
I was exactly where you were. I was like, oh no, we got to get that piece in here. But I think this gives us the vision gives us an opportunity to be bold, quite honestly, a little audacious, and really pushing the envelope for what do we want for our kids, and being able to say it in a manner that is out there, and it is far reaching. I mean, that's the piece that we do want it, that it's not attainable tomorrow. It's going to be something that drives our organization. It kind of goes back to that just cause. Why do we do this? Why are we pushing ourselves so hard to attain this piece? Because even if I use the Highline one, you know, if she were here right now, would she be able to say we know every kid right now by name, strength, and need? I'm not sure, but that's their goal. That's their goal. That's their aspirational goal.
I would say something quickly you could go that withdraws what I opened the meeting with, saying we have an object of either the student or the district to describe what we're looking at. I think everybody is running a three-legged race with the district and the student tied together with a bandana in the middle leg, and that's just fine.
I think so too. I do. I think we see our students as our district. I mean, that is our core work. It's why we open our doors every day, are for students, not for adults.
So are we just kind of looking at the box of words to kind of send forward to, are we okay with, because I think the framework, I mean, there's lots of good things that are said in all those different pieces, except maybe the last one that's really short. But I mean, there's a good idea there, but it's too short, right? Yep. So, but I think those are some really powerful pieces that we have up in the box, and if we're not wordsmithing it, are you and Diane going to wordsmith it? And then
We'll-
take it to the committee, or does the committee work on it? How does this?
We'll Diane and I and Kim will tweak it based off of today to say, okay, what were things that we need to take out, remove, that the board has no consensus on at all, and then really bring it over to that group. So again, you're doing exactly what we asked. Is there anything not on the dartboard that you don't want on this dartboard going forward? And we had a good conversation around individualized and why we've got to be crystal clear as to what we mean if we're using that type of terminology. And then we heard this mindful of each student needs and strengths. We also heard future citizen. Kim or Diana, anything else that we would add into the box itself?
I don't see anything. I think you captured it pretty accurately.
Kim agrees. She hollered over to me.
Sorry, forgot to unmute.
Board, is there anything else that you want in here for that committee to really grapple with? Or out of these four, is there anything, phraseology or anything in it that you don't want going forward?
I'm not sure that for me, reading in the last one, the real world mind, mindset, or it just
Mhm.
reads strangely to me, real world mind. But I think there are many ideas that are captured in these four different statements. So yeah.
Okay. Others?
I would hope that we could build in maybe some of those last pieces that we added to the vision box. You know, if the statements were going to be tweaked, I would hope that we could think about the mindfulness and the citizen piece.
Yeah, that's what Diana and I will do in the next week or so, is to really take with this conversation and tweak, adjust these four.
I don't know how everybody else feels about servant's heart. That seems a little kumbaya-ish to me. Kind of churchy-ish.
We got a good chuckle out of Kim next door. No.
Just my thought.
Well, I think although it may have kind of that quality, I think there are a number of community organizations and members of our community that I think that I hear that terminology a lot in this valley. Can I say that? So I think that people know what that means. That I think would resonate, but I get that not everybody would use that terminology, but I think in this valley it has some significant meaning. But that's my perspective. I don't have an issue with it, but I can understand if people do have an issue with it. So.
Sorry, I'm okay either way. I just had to put it out there.
I'm glad you did.
It's fine. Yeah. I get it. I get what you're saying.
It's probably something that could be test marketed when it gets to a wider group at the strategic planning team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The concept of community service, belonging, giving, interdependence, you know, that's a good one, and it's part of citizenship and
Yeah. Contributing citizen,
Yeah,
productive citizen,
finding the
engaged
word and making it
citizen,
better.
lots of other terms that could be.
In the third one, it says servant leaders instead of servant's heart. So that's kind of, I think it's kind of a similar way of saying it.
That's good. We got that in our heads now. We'll think that one through. All right, we'll keep these here for now, but as you guys reflect on it in the next, 5-6 days, if there's something that you want changed, shoot me an email, and we'll take that into our thinking, because we'll be bringing the group together in December. So have some time for you to reflect on this work. So let's shoot down to our strategic priorities. Again, love the 3 buckets that the board has chosen around academic excellence, partnership, and a thriving environment. And again, our role here is to make sure people understand what we mean by academic excellence. So it's trying to be more concrete with this terminology, partnership and thriving environment. Again, we took a stab, but there's no ownership here. This is yours. All three of us went through the documents and the minutes, trying to pull out the words that were consistently said. And this is where we came down to. But again, add, delete, change, make it yours, even more so yours.
So
Gut reactions?
I'm going to compare the first academic excellence versus the second. All I would do is to say we aim to get education right for every student, because again, this is a goal, and we don't always get it right, but we're trying, right? So, but I think that's a really powerful statement in and of itself. So I like how academic excellence was kind of played out in those 2 examples. And yes, I think it goes without saying that we're attempting to do that every day. So.
Okay.
I would agree with saying we aim, and otherwise I think that's pretty good. I still am choking on the word academic because it isn't global enough for me, but I don't know what else we could put in. Educational, we're repeating education if we do that. And so I'm okay with academic as long as it gets understood correctly, but it does need to be aim, not we do it. We're not advertising, we are striving.
Yes, I agree. It reads a lot better, aim. It sounded a little bit too confident without words. Although that's what we want to, I don't know if we're quite there for everyone. A second word that just pops out is transform in the second set under thriving environment. Transform to me just means to take something and make it something else. And I just feel like not everyone needs their learning and their life outcomes transformed.
So what would you suggest in place of that, Maria? I like that point, but how do you see that?
Let me think about it. I just, I mean, if we're thinking here, district wide, I would say a good chunk of our kids, through the process of the educational system, are on the right path. So there's no reason to kind of transform the path they're on, or the resources. Let me think.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
What about elevate learning? Because we're trying to take them to the next level of their capabilities. I don't know.
I love the word elevate. I think it just sounds up here.
Get my fingers right.
To me, we've got two slightly different approaches in the thriving environment. The first one, we're talking about the atmosphere that we want to create to enable people to thrive. And then the second one, we're talking about using resources to generate success. And they're complementary, but they're slightly different. I don't know which one the board feels is the real priority.
It's a good question.
In the silence, then, I think I would put resources more in. I have a different view on partnership, I think, a little. You have shifted me to the first thing I think about with partnership is the school district cannot do it alone, that this is that kind of partnership with everybody else. And I think using our resources well, to me, fits in with partnership if I'm looking at a package of priorities. And maybe I would say if thriving environment is our priority, then that makes it our mission to create an environment, an atmosphere in the schools that makes it possible for all the students to learn and get the right education in terms of academic excellence. That's how I would see thriving environment, more in that sense. The kind of people we are, the kind of community we want the schools to be.
And Martin, that's that really nice synergy there, because you're playing off of each one, that each one matters to the next one, that you have this partnership. As you said, we need everybody to get this done. No one entity can do this work anymore by itself. And then you have this thriving environment where it's more around, and I really do like this word, this elevate, to elevate learning and life outcomes, however we nuance that piece there. So they play off of each other. We need partners to really continue helping us make this a thriving environment to elevate learning and outcomes for everyone.
So in place of aligning resources, it sounds like, Martin, you're saying focusing on the features of the environment. So could we say something about, instead of using the word environment again, atmosphere, a welcoming and resilient building, something like that. I'm not finding the right words, but we're trying to foster the right atmosphere to have better learning. And
one thought I had, this is a bit clumsy, but I think it gets to what I was thinking. Let's use the aim. We aim to create welcome, nurture, flexibility, and resilience. Picking the four from the top one, and now we make it into an action statement by using the word create.
Say it to me one more time, Martin.
We aim, well, This is too long. I said, we aim to create, and the create may get welcome, make them nouns. Welcome. Oh. This is clumsy, but then we can fix the wording up later. Welcome, nurture, flexibility, and resilience in our students' world. And I'm adding it in the students' world just to throw something else in to take us down the flexibility and resilience in our students' world. Yeah, and then resilient you've got in the top version up top.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that can be distilled into an action-oriented priority, and it is about the environment rather than the use of resources. The resources being supportive.
You know, because when I think about that thriving environment and trying to connect back to the words you use, thriving environment is also a place for where our staff have to thrive too, for our students to thrive. I mean, one of the goofy sayings I always talk about with our staff is our big people need to grow before our little people grow. And a thriving environment is one that has a strong culture and climate that community members feel welcomed into on a daily basis, and they feel like it's their place too. From our Spanish speaking, English speaking, whatever background you are in. When you said the words thriving environment a couple of weeks ago, I was like, bam, that is a great term, because that's how I see I see thriving environment as culture, as climate for all staff, students, and parents. It is that belonging. It's that sense of we're in this together.
I think leaving staff and parents out and only talking about students is something that we got slapped on the chops about recently somewhere. And I think it's quite right. We're so focused on the students that we forget that we owe and depend on everybody else, and they deserve to be included. So I'm really glad that you said that.
I think the way it was originally stated covers that, because it doesn't specify align resources to transform learning and life outcomes. You know, that applies to staff as well as students in my mind, because the teachers need training, they need to have a satisfactory, compensation package, and so on and so forth. Positive work environment, that is going to be covered under alignment of resources to transform learning and life outcomes for students.
And I think I would add into that too is, the board's priority to make good financial decisions about how we allocate our resources to run our operations kind of feeds into that as well. So I'll just put that out there.
So I really like the word culture that you use, Paul, and I'm wondering if we were able to, instead of just saying thriving environment, because to me, an environment tends to be a more physical structure, whereas a culture is a morale. It's an idea. It's how people embrace one another. It's outside of building walls as well. So I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but instead of having thriving environment, if we used environment to describe, but really it's a thriving culture for students and staff. And then we can, I don't know. I think that culture word is important because it goes beyond the environment, I guess, that we want people to see our district as this is part of their culture now, right? This is, it's not just in their buildings, it doesn't matter whether they're in a portable or in a building that needs some repairs and stuff. This is a mindset. It's a culture that everybody is embracing, the staff, the students, the families, the community. So I think culture is a bigger word, a more powerful word than environment, but that's my opinion.
Maria?
I agree. I think Michelle described it perfectly. It just seems like it's more embracing. Environment just seems like a little bit more cold, like, a building, 4 walls.
I see it differently, but I'm willing to defer. I think if you're creating something, you have to create the environment first that is fertile for the culture to develop. And the culture is the end, and we're talking about making this a medium-term, action-oriented priority. So that, but it's fine with culture. I'm going along with it. But that, to me, that would make a little bit more, put a bit more passion into what I thought I was doing. And the other one is, I think there are two different priorities: using resources and creating culture environment. I think they're complementary, but each one, I think, has its own platform.
Well, and to bounce off of that, we already created the environment, our school system, our district, our classrooms. Because I could see Martin's point. But I don't know. I'm
this is confession. In my own subconscious, the word social was in front of environment, and that's just the way I read it, and that's not necessarily correct.
Mm.
Interesting. And it's funny because that's where I went to. I went to the human aspect of it. I think I didn't go to the physical aspect of it. But there is this, if I'm trying to harken back, even when we were talking about thriving environment, we did also talk about the actual physical buildings, because I think we did recognize that there was some work to be done on some of our buildings. not to go too far out on a stretch there, but I do believe that, I'll have to go back and look, but I do believe actual physical buildings came up from the board in that thriving environment as well.
You're right, it did. Facilities came up.
Yeah.
That was something that came out of the stakeholder feedback, and that was in our SWOT analysis, and actually strengths, weakness, and opportunity. So it showed up in multiple categories.
I think that might be the kind of choice, if we go back to the lessons we were given, that you make hard choices and you have to cull things to get to your priorities. You maybe can't have as your top priority social and physical together, or both, or the stakeholder can tell us which ones they think are more important. And putting both of them in play mightn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm okay with keeping the environment, because I think you're right. I think that does kind of look towards the facilities. You might, but I like the word culture. I like that you have it there as a descriptor. I think that is important. Under partnerships, I'm wondering if we need to include parents or families, maybe instead of the parent guardian issue, because I think that is a pivotal piece, and we've found that to be even more so during the pandemic, right? So
I agree, parents are part of the partnership.
Maybe it should say something about growing. I struggle with the word scholars. I don't really love it. scholars and supporting families and employees. Is that what you're getting at? That we're not using the families as resources, we're supporting families, right? We're including.
Well, they're part of the partnership, right? I mean, particularly for younger kids, but we have to be working with families to make sure that their students not only have access to the resources, but that families have their needs met as well, so they can also support, you know?
Right. Yeah. I guess my point was not to list families as a resource. I mean, to me, the idea of listing resources was community agencies, other
Right.
outside resources.
Not as a resource, but as a partnership. The families as a part of that partnership piece, not families as a resource, but families as part of that partnership.
Yes. Okay. I was reading that one differently.
Yeah, and right now I'm just hearing some words, so I'm throwing them in there.
Yeah, it's changing so fast.
Yeah, so don't read it as a complete thought. Just Paul's crazy brain. Read it as that. But I hear what you're saying, that we've got to do a better job of, when we write this piece out, is what do we truly want out of this partnership? We want to engage multiple community out, from families to community agencies, as Laura said, all for the goal of improving student outcomes, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I think we have to give and get. So particularly with the families. The families, without the families, heaven knows nothing will happen, but we need to do some work to give them the help that they need to deliver their part.
Mm-hmm.
And to a lesser extent, I think community organizations are the same thing. We're not going to have partners if we're only looking for resources and saying, help me, help me.
I love that piece, Martin, because I think too often school districts, do this, kind of the outward hand, as opposed to we are a true partner in this thing together. So I think that's a great. Yeah, that's really good. Any other wisdom, words of thought that you want us to think about as we'll reorganize these pieces and rewrite for drafts?
I think you guys have a really good start, and I don't envy your wordsmithing, but I like kind of the second. So in the first piece, you've got kind of those, in the second and third, the partnership and thriving environment, you have kind of just different words listed, but I kind of like the phrases that you did in the second half a little bit better.
Yeah.
Just some wordsmithing, but I like the first phrase for academic excellence over the second one. So. But I like a phrase. I think it reads smoother, And
again, board, take a few days, review them. If you have any feedback, shoot us an email, call, text, send a flare, and we'll make any adjustments and add to. Because again, we're going to take this out to that committee. And then we're also going to be working with a student group who just really, even though there will be students on this, we also want to test drive it with some of our just a larger group of students themselves to get their perspectives on it, because it's why we open our doors.
So is this going to be on the Padlet, or how will we refer to this, Paul, in the future?
I'm going to hand that one over to Diane. I'm struggling here. I'm just on Google Docs. Let's just be honest.
Done a great job. We're bringing them along. I think we'll probably just share, just in an effort to collaborate. We'll probably just stick within Google. It's easier for us on kind of the back end to share and collaborate, and then share out with you once we make those adjustments. So I think we'll stick with this. Padlet was great. in kind of that initial discussion to be able to capture everything really, transparency wise. But I think now that we're getting to a point where we're really refining things in anticipation of that next step, we can probably just use the Google Doc.
Thank you.
All right, so we've got what we need now. Next step is literally going to that strategic group in December and really walking them through. And their piece is now we're on the dartboard and then trying to bring it in one or two. Again, they're not going to go all the way to the bullseye. That's still ultimately the boards on all of these pieces. You're the bullseye on this piece. But I think what they'll help us do is the wording, the phrasing. What are they looking for as a community, as hopefully a very diverse group of individuals who will give us their feedback, and we will give you all their feedback as well. So
Great.
Again, knocked it out of the park. Great work. Great work.
Thanks for that. Okay, so we've got nothing else on the agenda today. This was our work, and we ended almost on time, 2 minutes over. So that's good. And so WSD conference is coming up this week. I don't know if you all registered and got your little table tent. You can't see that because I've got a background on, but yeah, full schedule of activities for the rest of the week. Otherwise, we will be together Monday, agenda planning meeting at 11, and Michelle, you're on for that. And then our regular board meeting on Tuesday, the 24th. So thank you all. See you.
Yeah.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.